What do you know about the multiverse? How many universes do you think are out there? Thousands? Millions? Billions? An infinite number? The truth is that we don't know. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I better reintroduce myself for those of you that don't know me. My name is Marcus. I was formerly a soldier in the 9th Roman Legion from Earth Prime, before it fell at the hands of Lucifer's second-born son, Abaddon, in the Battle of the River Styx. I recently posted here about my experience in a story called I Served in the 9th Roman Legion, after which I found myself on an alternate Earth where I was found by a woman called Janus. Janus is what we call a keeper. It's a complicated job that involves making sure the multiverse doesn't collapse in on itself. I could go on about the rules of the multiverse all day. For instance, time moves differently in different universes. In one universe, the year could be 167 AD, and in the next, it can be 2039. Yeah, the multiverse is weird. But it all starts and ends with Earth Prime. Earth Prime was the first Earth. It will be the last. Actually, that particular universe was the first universe entirely. I'm only using Earth as an example to keep things simple. That particular Earth is very sought after by various supernatural forces. Anyway, Janus traverses the multiverse using a ship that has the ability to poke holes in the very fabric of reality. I won't bore you with the science because, truthfully, I'm not sure how it works. I barely scrape by with the knowledge I have most of the time. The ship isn't large, probably around the size of an RV. I can remember the first time I set foot on it. I was horrified. It honestly isn't what you'd expect. Unless you were expecting a literal chrome-colored flying saucer. Keep in mind, I was born in 125 AD. I've never seen a car before, or a truck, or a machine of any kind. I pulled my burning neon blue sword out the moment the engine sprang to life. Janus laughed and told me to calm down. She explained that it was similar to a boat, but instead of floating across the water, it moved across space and reality. I didn't even know how to comprehend what she was telling me. So, she showed me. Personally, I'm from the actual Earth Prime. When the second horseman teleported away from Gehenna, I ended up on Earth 264. That Earth was in the year 320 AD. We hovered over what looked like a massive army of Greek hoplites as they marched on what I recognized as home. The Greek soldiers were marching on Rome herself. Hoplites and centuries clashed in the streets in a glorious display of blood and carnage. I found myself being made strangely uneasy by the sight of the battle. It's currently 380 AD. Notice anything strange? I thought we had conquered the Greeks, I asked. On Earth Prime, yes. On this Earth, the Greeks had help. Why? I asked. The Greco-Roman gods were a lot more hands-on, she said. I turned and looked at her with a raised brow. Right as a massive blue bolt of lightning came down on top of the Romans. Several bodies were charred. Several more were blown to pieces. Then, out of the lightning emerged a man in white robes with a white beard. A man I recognized from the stories and fables. Jupiter? I asked. They call him Zeus. He's less of a rapist on this Earth. There was a peace treaty between the Romans and Greeks, brokered by Zeus himself. But the Romans had Alexander assassinated. We watched Zeus spend roughly 15 minutes decimating the Roman lines. Computer, what's the most likely outcome of this timeline? Janus asked as she looked at a screen next to her. The screen morphed for a few seconds. It looks like the Greek gods conquer most of the planet. I guess instead of the Axis and allies, we get the Greek and Egyptian gods in World War II. she said. Did you just say World War II? As in, there are two of them? I asked. In most timelines, yes, she said. Couldn't you stop them from happening? I asked. Changing the timelines off of their natural course is against the rules. We're not time travelers. The Keepers only intervene if something or someone from outside of said universe changes something. Also, once it happens in a universe, it can't be changed. Then, her expression went serious. I just want to be clear on that right now. I can't go back and save your brothers. A lot of people think we can time travel because we're Father Time's keepers. We can't. But like I said, I may be able to offer you vengeance for their deaths. How? I asked. The universe is a big place. You're not the only one who wants to kill Abaddon or Lilith. You just don't have the means. Janus was interrupted by an alarm going off on her screen. She very quickly turned to it. Shit. What? I asked. She put a headset on and started typing. This is Keeper Janus. We've got a code 3 on Earth 2132. Infectious parasite from the outside. Outside? I asked. Outside of the multiverse. When we arrived on Earth 2132, the year was 1916. This was one of the faster moving timelines. But if you were on this Earth, you wouldn't know it. Time seemed normal there. Janus hovered her craft over a bridge where 3 men were dumping a body that was wrapped in a cloth into a partially frozen river. What are they doing? I asked. Computer? Janus said. The assassination of Grigory Rasputin. A monotone female voice replied. Who? I asked. Grigory Rasputin was a Russian mystic and self-proclaimed holy man. He is best known for having befriended the royal family of Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia, through whom he gained considerable influence in the later years of the Russian Empire. I have no clue what any of that means, I said. He was a priest of sorts that held influence over an emperor, Janus put it bluntly. And what's he got to do with the outside? I asked. Janus piloted the ship a bit closer to where the body was now floating downstream under the ice. Computer, scan the body. On the screen nearest Janus, a 3D model of the man's body appeared. It looked fairly normal. Except, there was a gaping hole where his genitals used to be. Well, that's not good, Janus said sternly. Where are his? I asked, doing my best not to freak out over all of this new technology around me. Computer? Asked Janus. In this timeline, Rasputin's genitals were castrated and placed in a glass jar on the orders of Russian Grand Duchess Tatiana. However, the computer glitched a few times. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, Janus said as she slapped the side of the screen. What? I asked. That's the anomaly, which is why the computer brought us here. What are you saying? We have to find the penis? I could hear Janus exhale as she rubbed her temples. Yep, we have to find Rasputin's penis. Our first order of business was tracking down the Grand Duchess. The computer found her a few miles outside of the palace. The ship was there in an instant, almost like it had teleported. We found her inside of a hotel room, disrobing a military uniform, one that I'd later learned belonged to a lieutenant in the Russian Chevalier Guard. There she is, Janus said calmly as she stood up from her chair. What are you doing? I asked. I gotta go get the penis, said Janus as she pulled a device that I would later learn was a gun from her jacket. Stay here, she ordered before walking off. A few seconds later, she was in a room with Tatiana. The woman looked very surprised to see her. I couldn't hear what was said as I was inside the ship watching from the window, but I could see the concern in the Duchess' face. She nodded towards the dresser, where the penis sat in a sealed glass jar. Janus turned towards it. But the moment she did, everything went to shit. Several spider-like legs erupted from the sides of the appendage, shattering the glass. "Fuck me," I muttered as the hit mutated into a massive eyeball. I was honestly terrified for Janus' safety. The eyeball looked at her. Janus said something to the Duchess before she fired her pistol. The penis jumped just in the nick of time, shattering the window and falling down into the snow. I looked at it for a second before the eyeball popped out. I think I visibly flinched. "Extra-dimensional presence detected. Deploying countermeasures." The ship's voice rang out. I sat straight down as the vessel began to move. The penis was fast, about as fast as a rabbit. But the ship's countermeasures were effective. I'm not sure where from, but the ship fired what looked like a small arrow that slammed into the thing's back. It very quickly went limp and fell into the snow. About 20 minutes later, the penis was staring at me from a small glass box. It had tried escaping several times, but every time it made contact with the wall, it was pumped full of electricity. It took me a moment to take in just how big this thing was. It was easily 10, maybe 15 inches. Jane stood beside me, her arms crossed, and an irritated look on her face. "And I thought I'd seen it all," she said. "What happened to this thing?" I asked. "It's a parasite. It latches on and replaces an organ, very similar to the tongue-eating louse, except this parasite infects sentient beings and adds them to a monus collective." "What?" I asked. Janus exhaled. "Okay, I keep forgetting that you're just a Roman legionnaire, and your knowledge of the more modern scientific world is a bit lacking. Here, let me help you with that." A few moments later, I was being placed into a metal chair. Janus was putting a large helmet on my head. "What is this?" "It's like a crash course in knowledge. It'll keep you up to speed on, well, the basics of interdimensional travel, normal timelines and whatnot, basic modern math, science, history of different dimensions. That, and I threw some firearm instruction on there as well." "Firearm?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "Yeah, where we're going, you're gonna want some of that." She clicked a few buttons on her keyboard. "Oh, and Marcus, this is gonna hurt worse than anything you've ever experienced in your life." "But I've been to hell," I said. She smiled. "I know." She then flipped the switch. The pain that was fired through my brain at that moment in time was borderline unbearable. She didn't lie. It did hurt worse than anything I'd ever experienced. But the knowledge that came with it was vital. I learned all about the rules of the multiverse, Father Time, Amonu, the basic history of several popular universes, including the one I'm writing this in. I learned about machines and computers. I learned how to operate most weapons in the multiverse. I also learned where the Keeper's home is. It's a base located on the moon of Earth Prime, out of sight, but always watching. That was the interesting thing. I learned all about the Keepers. Father Time is a cosmic being, I guess, one of a group called the Primordials. He can't control time travel or anything like that, but he can control how fast time moves in almost all of the multiverse, aside from Earth Prime. He uses these other Earths to predict the future in Earth Prime, as Earth Prime is the center. I'm sure you're wondering what makes it so important. Let me explain. If you're a citizen of another Earth or universe, when you die, your soul doesn't go to heaven or hell. It goes to the next Earth where you're still alive, and so on until your consciousness merges with your Earth Prime counterpart. Once your Earth Prime counterpart dies, then you enter the afterlife. Like I stated, everything begins and ends with Earth Prime. But I'm sure you're wondering, How does that work if Earth Prime's timeline is ahead of another Earth's? Well, Earth Prime's timeline moves slower than all of the rest of them, as far as we know at least. There are no timelines behind Earth Prime's. As far as the future goes, most universes don't make it out of the late 1990s. We don't know the future of Earth Prime. But, by our estimates, no Earth has made it past 2072. That's when we think Earth Prime will end. I'm sure you're wondering what Janus meant when she offered me a chance at vengeance. Well, let me explain a bit. Janus herself is from Earth Prime. She was on Earth during the First Gehenian War. She saw Enoch march humanity's forces into battle. She was recruited by the Keepers when after she was abducted and experimented on by Cain and accidentally sent to an alternate Earth, one in which the dinosaurs never went extinct. The experiments made her immortal. So, she got to see humanity on this Earth grow alongside the dinosaurs, which wasn't easy. It took a while to build a civilization, but they eventually did. Dinosaurs took the places of most livestock and pets in society. Instead of horses, chariots were pulled by raptors. Then, a Gehenian legion led by the then Prince Abaddon invaded. This Earth fell within days. She lost her entire family again. Janus only survived because a keeper who was logging the event found her and realized she was in the wrong timeline. Janus has spent most of her career looking for a chance at revenge. She saw me as an opportunity, someone who she knew had to hate Abaddon as much as she did. She was right. The only issue was that we had no way of actually killing him, that we could find at least. After our ordeal with Rasputin's penis, Janus brought me to the Keeper's headquarters, which just happened to be a massive base on the dark side of Earth Prime's moon. Janus teleported us inside the hangar. Upon exiting the ship, we were greeted by an entire fleet of hundreds more ships just like it. The hangar itself was high-tech. Describing it now, the best thing I could compare it to was a science fiction movie. Janus walked me into the control room where several keepers sat and stared at 3D projected screens. The room itself was massive. There were rows upon rows of keepers. "How many keepers are there?" I asked. "I've never asked," she replied. She led me up the center aisle. The walk seemed like it took forever, but we eventually found ourselves at the end of the room, which led into a small office. She knocked on the door, and it opened. A bearded man sat, sipping a drink and watching another one of those 3D screens. One that depicted something I'd recognized immediately. The battle I'd fought in not a week prior. He eyed me as I entered. "Janus, what have you brought me?" he asked. He was exactly where you said he would be. The man rubbed his white beard. "So, the battle went as expected then?" he asked. "Down to the survive..." Janus stopped herself before continuing as she glanced at me. I was about to question her when I myself was cut off by him. "So, Abaddon has been named King of Gehenna, probably at Lilith's behest, which matches up to what I predicted as well. And heaven has done nothing," Janus added. "Of course not. There was no invasion of Earth Prime. They don't meddle in the affairs of Lucifer and his family." "Speaking of, what happened with him?" asked Janus. The bearded man hit a button, and his screen showed an image of the now one-armed Lucifer in a cage next to Abaddon's throne. "He'll be in there until Abaddon gets bored with him." Janus took a deep breath. "So, what now? You wanted me to get Marcus. You said we'd have a chance to go after Abaddon. What is it?" The man smiled as he rubbed his beard. "The Sword of Enoch, if you can find it. That may be one of the only weapons that will kill him. But I must warn you, the future is always changing, free will and all. Finding it won't be easy, I'll upload what information I have on it onto your ship's drive. Also, we captured a parasite from the outside. It attached itself to a Grigori Rasputin. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that? Asked Janus. The old man raised an eyebrow. Have you run scans through any of the other timelines? Usually when Amonu takes an interest in a soul, that interest reaches across the multiverse. Janus shrugged. I hadn't really thought about it, with the whole Coin hell going on. The man rubbed his beard as he took a second to think. Abaddon can wait. He won't be attacking Earth Prime anytime soon, thanks to the Horsemen and your friends, he said, looking at me. Figure out this parasite problem first. Once you're done with that, then we can talk about the sword. If Amonu gets inside the multiverse, there won't be anything left to fight Abaddon for. We can't put anyone else on this? I feel like my time would be better served on the Abaddon case, asked Janus. The man smirked. Your time is best served where I deem it. Trust me, everything will work out. My keepers exist to ensure the multiverse survives. In order to do that, we must take care of the most pressing threat. That isn't currently Abaddon. Janus took a deep, irritated breath before turning and walking out. It was at that moment that I realized that we'd been talking to Father Time himself. Janus didn't say another word. She turned and started to walk out of the room. I stood staring at the old man, who smiled at me. Let's go, Marcus, Janus said. Janus led me back to her ship, where we found the penis watching us closely. Try not to stare at it, she said as she sat down. I sat in the seat next to her. Where are we going now? I asked. Computer, run a scan for all timeline anomalies involving Rasputin. Scanning, the computer replied. Janus took a deep breath. Let's find out. The computer scanned for a moment as we sat there silently. I thought about what Father Time had said about Amonu. If it got into the multiverse, there wouldn't be a multiverse. Now, for those of you who don't know what Amonu is, let me explain what I learned from the migraine helmet. When the multiverse was created, the leader of the primordial beings, a figure called Yahweh, helped birth life into existence. The details on how or why have been debated for millennia, but when Yahweh bestowed self-awareness, some of the other primordials protested, the leader of them being Amonu. You see, all of the primordials played a hand in creating life. They all loved life. But Yahweh wanted life to have what we call free will. He and Amonu argued. Amonu didn't want sentient life to have free will, for fear that they would use it to destroy each other rather than live in harmony. Yahweh said it wasn't the primordial's choice to make. Their job was to create it, to let it grow and prosper on its own. Life without free will isn't life. It isn't genuine. Amonu's response to this was to try and corrupt Yahweh's creation, to show how bad the idea of free will was. He started with Lilith, who then corrupted Lucifer when he was sent to remove her from Eden. She also was the one who sent the serpent that tricked Eve into eating from the tree of life. Amonu was banished from the multiverse for this, existing now on the outside of all reality. But just because he's banished doesn't mean he's powerless. He's still a primordial. He can still gain influence among sentient beings through various means. Most involve a piece of him being summoned in some kind of ritual, which is how we get the parasitic organisms that come from the outside. The computer came back with the results of the scan a few seconds later. Anomalies in 2 universes involving Grigori Rasputin, Earth 4243, and Earth 5130, the computer said. Janus took a deep breath and looked at me. Take us to 4243 first. With that, we found ourselves in another universe, Earth 4243. The year was 1921. The ship was hovering outside of a large brick mansion. Where are we? I asked. Somewhere in the French countryside. Why? I asked. Computer? This is the location of the cult of Rasputin, said the computer. Oh, a cult. You don't think they worship his? I started. Jane sighed as she stood up. Let's go, Marcus. We've got work to do. I'd never used a firearm before. It was light compared to the swords and shields I trained with. Don't get me wrong, I still had my sword on me. The firearm I had was a standard issue plasma rifle. It was a sleek futuristic design that could fire over 1,000 times before needing its core reloaded. Janus was at point with her pistol. We had found ourselves in a dark hallway. The whole mansion had been empty and dark, aside from one room at the center. That's where the computer had detected signs of life. As we approached cautiously, we could see the torchlight flickering in the room. We could also hear the chanting. I had fought a few cults in my time with the Ninth, one being a group that used to sacrifice their women to an Egyptian alligator god called Sobek, so this wasn't anything new. I was prepared mentally. No one noticed as we came to the doorway. There were maybe 20 people in the room, all facing an altar where a robed priest stood holding up a jar that had this universe's Rasputin's penis inside of it. That was when I noticed the naked woman on the altar. The man was chanting something as he pulled the member from the jar. I aimed my rifle at him. Drop the penis, commanded Janus. The whole room fell silent as they turned to us. That was when the parasite made its move. The penis mutated in much of the same form as the last one. Its sharpened legs dug into the now screaming priest. Shit, Janus barked as she fired her pistol. The priest took a plasma round to the face and fell backward. I looked at Janus as the cultists fled in terror from the room. Why'd you kill him? I demanded. She waved her hand for me to shut up. I did so, right as the priest sat back up, his face bloody from the plasma bolt, but in the place of the hole were several small black tendrils. What the fuck? I shouted as I raised my rifle and opened fire. My plasma rifle blew several holes into the priest. He stumbled backward with each shot, but he didn't go down. More tendrils appeared in his wounds, these ones larger. What is this thing? I asked. It's what happens when one of the parasites infects you. We have to kill it. Janus sneered. How? I asked. The man was almost a mash of slimy black tendrils and blood now. I could see the lower half of his face, or what was left of it, smiling at us. Ship, anomalous parasite located. Infectious stage 4. Deploy countermeasures. Just then, the ship came crashing through the wall to our right as it deployed a hail of fire. The creature let off an ungodly screech as the flames engulfed it. The air in the room was scorching. The creature crumpled into a heap of ashes. I kept my rifle on it though. The room went silent aside from the low humming of the ship. Janus and I both cautiously approached the flames. The naked woman was still laying on the altar. She was out cold though. Ship, do a scan of the woman, said Janus. The scan must have been quick, because Janus lowered her weapon. Okay, area's clear, she said. Just like that? I asked. She shrugged. Yeah, just like that. Around an hour later, we were both sitting in the cockpit of her ship. I was staring at the penis parasite we'd captured originally. I told you not to stare at it, Janus said from behind me. I know, it's just, why haven't we killed this thing yet? I've been using it to scan for more anomalies of similar nature. Keep in mind, we still have another one on Earth 5130. I sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. All of this had been a marvelous distraction from the events I'd gone through merely 2 days prior, in Earth prime time at least. Speaking of, that's the time that the Keepers use. EPT for short. Remember, all things begin and end with Earth Prime. We arrived on Earth 5130, this one in the year 1944. On most Earths, this was right in the middle of World War II. Our ship arrived right over an American unit that was pinned down behind a thin brick wall, gunfire making their cover smaller. Is this? I started. One of many Earths, World War II. Except in this timeline, Russia has been taken over by a... Oh shit. Jaina said. Don't tell me. He's missing his cock. I replied. My eyes caught a young soldier cowered down behind the wall after one of his buddy's hits was blown off. An image flashed through my mind. I was suddenly there again. The cold chill biting me. Blood splattered everywhere. I was watching Augustus's hit being cut off. I can remember taking a shaky breath. I'm unsure if a tear ran down my cheek. The next thing I knew, Janice's hand was on my shoulder. Marcus? She asked me softly. I came to and turned to her with a fake smile. She had a concerned look on her face. Marcus, I can do this part on my own. I'm fine, I lied. No, you're not. I can... Keeper Janus, this is Keeper Royce. Permission to board. A voice called over the speaker. Janus's concerned face morphed to one of confusion. Royce? The hell is he doing here? She wondered out loud as she clicked a few buttons on her keypad. Who is Royce? I asked. Permission granted, she said before turning back to me. He's... Royce was teleported just behind us before she could finish that sentence. He seemed to be a younger man, maybe slightly younger than my 25 years at that point in time. But like everything else, looks are deceiving. Captain, to what do we owe the pleasure? Janus asked. Royce wore a dark leather trench coat and black clothing underneath it. I could see that he had a plasma rifle similar to the one Janus had given me, slung across his back. He rubbed his beard. This timeline's fast, he said. Father Time's got it moving around 1,000 times faster than Earth Prime. As he does with most, she said. Janus, while you guys were taking care of the anomaly on Earth 4243, 30 years passed here. The anomaly has gone from a level 4 to a level 10. You know what that means? He asked softly. No. We should have teleported straight to the anomaly. Father Time gave us the order. We can fix it. Not a level 10. I could see Janus's eyes falter a bit. That was when I looked back at the battlefield, when I noticed what the soldiers were getting shot at. I stood up from my chair. Janus? I started. Janus kept arguing, but she hadn't noticed it yet. Janus, I said sharply. She turned around to see what I was staring at. I could hear her audibly gasp. The soldiers exchanging fire with the American troops. They weren't soldiers. They were people with tendrils-like growths all over their bodies. The ones that didn't have guns had axes or knives. The ones that didn't have those had their hands. There was an entire horde of them in the city. I'm sorry, Janus. It isn't your fault, Roy said softly. Janus took a deep breath to calm herself down. Shit, she barked. I know. We can't let it spread anymore. The demon seed should be going off in around 10 minutes. Demon seed? I asked. It's a black hole device that sends things to the outside. If Amonu's presence becomes too contagious, we send it back, Jaina said. What about all the people? I demanded. They won't be able to hold out. They'll all be gone within the month, Roy said. All be gone within the... We can help them, evacuate them. People don't have to die when you have the power to save them, I barked. Royce took a deep breath. I wish it were that simple, but they don't have anywhere to go. Plus, We can't risk contamination. One spore can take out an entire universe. He said, "It's not worth the risk." "So, we just killed them?" I asked, not really believing what I was hearing. "Technically, Rasputin's penis killed them," he replied. I wanted to protest, to do or say something, but I think deep down I knew he was right. I knew about sacrificing to save the many. Still didn't mean I agreed with it though. I slumped down in my seat. Royce looked at his watch. "Welp, look at the time. 2 minutes." He was then teleported off Janus's ship, leaving us in silence, watching as the lone remaining soldier, the coward, was swarmed by a bunch of tendrilled monsters. "Let's go," I said softly. Janus piloted the craft past the Earth's atmosphere, not stopping until we were at what was considered a safe distance. We made it with a few seconds to spare. It's hard to accurately describe what a demon seed does. The wormhole opens up. Most of the planet is sucked up, but not very quickly. It's like a vacuum picking up clumps of hair. What the gravity well doesn't get, the black planet-sized tendrils do. I assume that he belonged to Myuu himself. They wrap around the planet and yank it inside. I can remember wondering why he doesn't unleash more parasites with the wormhole being opened. I guess he tries, but it all gets sucked back up in the portal before he can escape. I didn't press for details because I didn't care at that point. I just wanted to take a nap. I think after the shock of everything, Janus and I needed a minute to breathe. We arrived back at base, and Janus showed me to my quarters. It was just a single studio apartment in one wing of the base. It had a bed though. I'd never laid on a bed like that before. The fanciest thing I'd ever slept on was a cot. I'll be completely honest. The place made me feel like a king, but I was tired and sorrowful. I laid down and went to sleep. That, however, didn't last long. I almost immediately found myself in another nightmare. This one watching Maxis be tossed into the Kahenian skies by Abaddon himself. He turned to me with malicious hatred in his eyes. "Why did you survive?" he asked. "What makes you so special?" I woke up to a knock at my door. I got up and groggily walked over to open it, only to be standing in surprise when I found Father Time himself staring at me. "Hello, Marcus," he greeted. "Hello, Mr. Time, I guess," I replied. "May I come in?" he asked. I let the old man inside. He walked in and very calmly sat down in the chair that was next to my bed. "Janus says you performed well on Earth 4243. Although I wouldn't expect anything less from an Omega soldier, especially one of Quintus's. I'm only here cause I'm curious. Have you given any thought to staying with us?" I took a second to think about it. Janus did promise me a shot at Abaddon. Father Time smirked. "She did, but I'm wondering how long you're willing to wait before taking that shot. Janus has already waited 250,000 years. You seem to be pretty adept at predicting things. How long do you think it'll take?" I asked. "Marcus, my predictions aren't always correct. I can only analyze the data I'm given and tell the most likely outcome. Right now, the data says you may have to wait a while." "May?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "I say may. You'll have an opportunity soon, but if you take it, you won't like the outcome," he said. "Let me guess. We go after him and die?" I asked. Father Time just put his hands on his knees. "If you take the coming opportunity, the most likely outcome is that Abaddon lives and goes on to conquer Earth Prime. And if I don't, you're going to have to wait almost 2,000 years. Earth Prime years. And that's for just an opportunity. You don't know the outcome of that one? I asked. Father Time just chuckled. Huh, I wish I could tell you. That far ahead in time is really up in the air. Depends on what you do with the choices you have now. And have you gone over this with Janus? I asked. Father Time shook his head. Janus is stubborn, but she's loyal. She'll understand. I thought for a minute or two. Part of me wanted to go anyway. Call it suicidal idealization. Maybe survivor's guilt. Part of me wanted to die. Part of me embraced the thought of death. But it would mean nothing if it didn't work. I needed a surefire way to go after Abaddon. You said something about a sword, I asked. The Sword of Enoch. Yes, that won't be found for another 400-ish years. And not by you two. So what then? When I get the opportunity to go after Abaddon, I say no? I asked. Father Time exhaled. I'm saying you're going to have to make a choice. Make the right one. A few hours later, I was awoken to another knock at my door. This time, it was Janus. She had a tablet in her hands. I think I have something, she said as she handed it to me. On it was an image of a familiar face, one I had seen only a few weeks prior. Cain? I asked. Unfortunately, he's got something called the Philosopher's Stone. I know you've heard of it. I have. What about the Sword of Enoch? I asked. The data Father Time gave me has it not appearing on Earth Prime for another 400 years. Now, according to our intel, Abaddon's going to be on Earth 1317 in 4 days. If we can get the stone by then, we can use it to vaporize him. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, remembering what Father Time had told me the night before. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. Father Time showed up at my door last night. He said something about our chances of beating him soon being poor. Janus gave me a confused glance. I took a deep breath. Look, I want them dead as much as you do, but I think it may be best to wait for a sure thing, and not a gamble, I said. I could see Janus's face falter a bit. It could work, she argued. It could, but I don't think it will, I said. Janus only stared at me. I think deep down she knew I was right. She'd been waiting for so long, but I also knew that Father Time had come to me for a reason. Well then, what do you recommend we do? She asked as she crossed her arms. We wait for an opportunity, a good opportunity. How long will that take? She asked. That was when the alarm went off above us.
Keeper Janus, Marcus Octavius, please report to the control room.
A voice called out. The walk was tense. When we got there, Keeper Royce was waiting for us. He was with another keeper. Janus, Marcus, this is... Head Keeper Argyle? Asked Janus. Argyle was a tall and well-built man. He was also the oldest and most powerful keeper the organization had. He rubbed his beard as he looked at us. The room was tense. I got the sense that they were both worried. Father Time has left, Argyle said sternly. Left? Asked Janus. Yes, he left. We don't know where he went. He also left us orders, said Argyle. What kind of orders? Asked Janus. Royce raised a brow as he pulled off his tablet. Agent Janus, you are to take Marcus to Earth Prime and recover the Philosopher's Stone. And Cain. Why? I asked. Royce eyed me. You remember Earth 5130? He asked. Yeah? The Rasputin from that universe somehow got off planet before the demon seed went off. We think he may have made it to an alternate Earth. You think? Asked Janus. Well, therein lies the problem. The Earth he made it to is one controlled by Kahinian forces. One you're familiar with, Janus. Shit, Janus said. What do you mean shit? I asked. Earth 1317, which is why Father Time predicted Abaddon would be there. If an Amonu-infected Rasputin gets into Gehenna, there's not much that could stop the spread. She said with an annoyed look. Have we coordinated with Heaven on this? Royce asked. Argyle nodded. They're sending an agent. We've also been in touch with the Kahinian representative. I thought they worshipped Amonu down there, Janus mumbled. Argyle looked at her. They haven't worshipped Amonu in millennia, and you know it. Less than an hour later, the Keepers had most of their forces mobilized. It was odd seeing so many of their ships in the air at once. Janus and I arrived on Earth Prime, her ship hovering just outside of a familiar cave entrance that was several feet off the ground. The ground was still burnt and littered with decayed bodies. Flashes of the fight with Gwen's undead army flashed through my brain. You think he's still here? I asked. Janus was silent, watching the entrance with a calm expression. That was when a familiar figure crept toward the cave entrance. The red-headed, bearded man that I'd met just before my trip to Hell. Merlin. Someone is, I said. Janus landed the ship. Merlin met us at the base of the walkway. Centurion, I thought you'd all been killed, he said. We were, I said. I could see his face falter a bit. My apologies. What can I do for you and your friend? This is one of Father Time's keepers, I said. I know. I recognize the ship. Cain and I have dealt with their kind before. What I'm wondering is why you're with them, he asked. We're trying to stop a threat. We need Cain's help. Merlin smirked at me. They care about the threat now? Where were they when Gehenna was threatening to invade? The Keepers don't interfere with Kahinian business. They don't threaten free will, said Janus. Merlin smacked his lips. Tell that to the revenants Lilith created. Those are soulless automatons, nothing more. That's your excuse? Merlin chuckled. How many lives have been lost while your Keepers sit idly by and watch? Tell me, Keeper, were you the one that logged the battle that killed his brothers? Did you watch them all die? I looked at Janus, whose eyes went straight to the ground. I could feel my heart skip a beat or two. You were there? I asked softly. I was the one who logged the battle. I told you, we don't get involved with Kahinian business. My orders were to pick you up after it was over. Why? I asked. Father Time thinks both the Primordials and Heaven have underestimated Abaddon. He thought you would prove useful. I wasn't sure how I felt in that moment. Deep down I'd known the truth. I'd known ever since we stood in Father Time's office. But the flashes of my brothers being decimated and her just fucking watching from the safety of her ship made my heart flutter. I took a deep breath. It doesn't matter right now. We chose to make that sacrifice, I said. What matters is that we see Cain. We have to stop this thing. Merlin crossed his arms. He turned and looked up at the cave opening, where Cain stood with his arms around the red glowing stone. Centurion, do you know what it is the Keepers plan to do with this? He asked. Vaporize Rasputin's penis? I asked in response. I could see Cain smirk. Rasputin, he's not born on this earth yet. I'll have to make sure he doesn't live to become a Monu's pawn like Lilith was. But still, the version of him you face now has become more than just a pawn. He has become a vessel. And you, Janus. It's been a while. I could see Janus take a slight step backward in fear. Her eyes were wide. That was when I remembered Janus had been experimented on by this man. I had completely forgotten. This whole thing must have been nerve-wracking for her. Oh, Janus, how I've missed you. I never got the chance to finish what I started. Cain took a deep breath. But that is the old me. I don't like hurting people anymore. Janus looked uneasy. You have to come with us, she all but yelped. I know, fate of the multiverse and whatnot. If I say no, heaven will send him. I'd rather not have to deal with him. Not again. Cain ended up boarding our ship, while Merlin stayed behind. It didn't take him long to notice the living penis that was watching him from its glass prison. Is this what I think it is? He asked. You've traveled the multiverse. You know. Janus replied as she got into her pilot's chair. I watched as Cain examined it. He held the stone tightly. So why not use a demon seed on Earth 1317? I asked. Because we don't know how he got there. We need to find this parasite and eliminate it. We can't burn it this time. It's grown too powerful. So we used the stone? I asked. Per our instructions. We arrived at Earth 1317 at dawn. Several of the Keeper ships had landed on the edge of a cliff that overlooked what would have been the sea, if one could call it that. The water was crimson. It's hard to properly describe the feeling this place gave me. It was eerily similar to the feeling I'd gotten when we traveled to Gehenna. Hopelessness. The sky in this place seemed to have a charcoal haze, almost like it was always about to storm. I wondered to myself what the Gehennians had done to it. I can remember staring off the cliffs into the ocean. The crimson waves danced below me. See what your brother's lives saved Earth Prime from? A voice said from behind me. I turned to see Cain. Then I looked back to the ocean. Merlin said you dealt with the Keepers before. What did he mean by that? I asked. The Keepers aren't a new organization. They're only slightly younger than I am. Merlin and I have traveled to many worlds in the multiverse. We've seen many things. The best and worst of humanity. They came after you because of your travels? Yes and no. When I was taken by Lilith as her vessel, she used me to worship a Munu. He was her god, her guide. I honestly don't know what was worse, hearing her voice in my head or his voice responding. But nevertheless, I did their bidding for a time, until I broke free. During that time, I'd had several encounters with the Keepers. I've killed several, but that was before I broke away from the Queen of Hell. Cain took a deep breath. The Keepers aren't hostile towards me anymore. However, they do not like Merlin and I going on our little escapades, he said with a soft laugh. I'm guessing Father Time had something to do with that, I said. Cain shrugged. Father Time vexes me. I do not know what his plan is, but to risk the stone being this close to Cainian forces, the threat must be massive. A few minutes later, Janus and I were standing in front of Argyle, Royce, and a man with two massive white feathery wings on his back. I recognized him from the stories Quintus used to tell us. He was an angel, heaven's representative. Cain had stayed on Janus's ship. Marcus, Janus, this is... Argyle started. My name is hard to pronounce in any human tongue. You may call me Victor. The angel interrupted. I looked him up and down. He had power to him. power that seemed to radiate. He also seemed to have a challenging effect on the very realm itself. When I stood near him, all the things that I'd felt in this place seemed to melt away. The power of heaven, the power of raw and unadulterated hope was overwhelming. And this was but one being. Victor is one of heaven's many angelic generals, said Argyle. The angel cast his eyes upon me with an almost pitiful stare. You're one of Quintus's? I took a deep breath. Quintus bestowed me with my power and weapons. I'm sorry for your loss. He was a fine general, Victor said. Yeah, I said solemnly, as my mind pondered why heaven just left us to die on the river Styx. Victor seemed to read my mind. If we could have intervened, that doesn't matter right now. I cut him off. We've got work to do. Victor nodded respectfully towards me. I turned to Argyle. What now? Asked Janus. We're still waiting for the ambassador from Gehenna, he said. And who would that be? She replied. Argyle only exhaled. That was when the stench of sulfur entered my nose. I could tell Victor had noticed as well. His hand calmly went to the silver handle of his sword. I saw his blue eyes narrow as they found their target. I turned. My heart jumped into my throat. Rage filled my very bones. My blood boiled at the sight of him. The newest king of hell himself. The fucker who killed my brothers. Abaddon himself stood there with a smug grin on his face. Hello there, he said. I thought you said we would be seeing a representative, not the fucking king, Janus growled. Aw, is that any way to greet an old friend? After all, you're the reason we got here. I eyed Janus. What does that mean? I asked. Abaddon's eyes shot to me. His face lit up with joy. You? I remember you. I can't believe you survived. Quintus must have really liked you, using the last bit of life he had to teleport you out of Gehenna. My hand shot to my sword, only for it to come to an abrupt stop as a cold hand caught my wrist. I looked down at it. The cold, dead hand. My eyes followed it up to its wrist, then to its armor. Its blackened and blood-stained surface was familiar. It was custom Roman armor, made for someone I knew. My eyes were afraid to look at his face. I knew Abaddon had the ability to resurrect the dead as revenants. Go ahead, look at your master, Abaddon whispered. This is cruel, Victor bellowed as his hand removed the dead hand from my wrist. I'm the king of hell. I never leave without my royal guard, Abaddon sneered. It was then that I looked up at his face. Quintus's eyes had been sewn shut, his lips as well. The stitches weren't gently put in either. Most of the wounds were still bleeding. My blood ran colder. I looked up at Abaddon. I'm going to kill you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, I'm going to. Marcus! Argyle interrupted. I stayed my tongue. Argyle turned to Abaddon, who was still smiling. Quintus teleported next to him. All parties involved know just how serious the situation is. We need to find this Rasputin and anyone he may have infected before he can get to Gehenna. I know not why you worry. Earth Prime's precious horsemen made sure we couldn't march our armies onto its shores anyway. If the Hellspawn can't get through the gate, one of Amonu's vessels can't either. Abaddon said sternly. Lilith can. She can possess her old body. She can straight up teleport there. You don't need a door. Neither does Lucifer. Isn't that right? Said Victor. Abaddon rolled his eyes. Daddy isn't going anywhere. Victor raised a brow. Did you kill him? Abaddon's jaw lowered. No, I cut his wings off. Regardless, Gehenna has access to every other Earth in the multiverse. We can't let them be taken either. Abaddon rolled his eyes as he inhaled. There are pockets of humans still alive on this rock. You should start there. Since I'm sure none of you want me walking alongside you in battle, he said as he eyed me. We'll be at the gate. Feel free to call out if you need me. Abaddon smiled as he and Quintus teleported away. Argyle turned to Janus. Has your ship scanned the planet for anomalies? He asked. Janus nodded. It's doing a good job of covering itself. It's powerful, said Royce. Can we locate the humans? Asked Victor. Computer, scan the planet for non-demonic life forms, Janus said. Several smaller circular drones separated from Janus' ship, flying in different directions. It will take a while, but we'll find them, Janus said. Argyle nodded as he turned to Royce. Have the other keepers do the same. My mind was still screaming at seeing Quintus again. Like that nonetheless. He still had his powers too. When Abaddon had said that there were pockets of humans still alive, he'd been exaggerating. There was only one settlement. It was a castle in what would have been the Amazon rainforest had this planet gone the course of most. One city with an estimated 10,000 people inside of it. Our ship flew over it. We were only scouting at this point. Life for the humans on Earth 1317 was rough. It had always been rough. From man's arrival to their conquest of the dinosaurs, to the Gahenian invasion that caused their downfall. It was even worse now. Like I said, they were all condensed in a single city. A city that was about 3 miles across and surrounded on all sides by massive walls. The buildings were decrepit. Most were made from cracked and uneven stone. The area was right in the middle of a desert. I found myself wondering why Abaddon hadn't taken the city yet. As if reading my thoughts, Janus turned to me. Abaddon needs the humans. Gehenna itself feeds on pain and suffering. Why kill most of the planet then? I asked. Janus sighed. Because Abaddon's a psychopath, Cain stated from behind us. No, Janus replied. When I was here, during the conquest, Abaddon wouldn't kill most of the people. This isn't Earth Prime. Their souls would only go to their next Earth's counterpart. They're useless to him dead. Gehenna runs on suffering, so he'd march his prisoners to the gate, to Gehenna, and make them suffer there. Of course, they'd die eventually, but not until he had his fun. Janus's voice was somber. When we entered the city, the plan was simple. Janus and I, as well as the other agents on the ground, would search for Rasputin. Once we found him, Victor would engage, while Cain worked a spell to eliminate the threat. The city smelled horrible, like a mixture of sulfur and death. Janus and I found ourselves in a market, examining the people. Most wouldn't dare look us in the eyes. We didn't even try to blend in. Their clothes were dirty and ashen. Above all, the citizens of the city looked tired. My heart ached for them. What kind of life is this? I asked in a whisper. Janus didn't answer. She only kept moving. The city was crowded. I kept my hand on my sword as I moved behind her. We moved through the city for hours. Eventually, we came across a small wooden shack where we met Royce. Anything? He asked. No, Janus said. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, Royce said. Janus took a deep breath. I looked at Royce, then back to the people. Royce seemed to know what I was thinking. It's horrible, isn't it? he asked. That's an understatement, I replied. It's gonna get a whole lot worse if we don't find what we're looking for. It was then that we heard the god-awful screech. Then a crash. I could hear Argyle's voice on the device on Janus's ear.
We found them. We need backup.
The three of us sprinted towards the commotion. There, we found the roped figure of Rasputin with the keeper's throat in one hand. Argyle was on the ground near him, a very visible wound on his shoulder. Janus and Royce both opened fire with their rifles. The bolts of plasma did little but bounce off of the man. I pulled Argyle to his feet. Shadows loomed overhead as the ship surrounded our position. Rasputin dropped the man to the dirt as he looked around. That was when I noticed. None of these people seemed to change what they were doing. They were all oblivious to us. I turned to Janus and Royce, who had both stopped firing their rifles. Rasputin then turned his attention to us and smiled widely. "You," he said softly. Realizing that my rifle wouldn't do shit, I pulled my sword from my hip. Rasputin's eyes were drawn to the burning blue blade. "You're from Earth Prime," he said. "You're not supposed to be here," Royce replied. "We have you surrounded." A thunderous voice boomed from above us. I looked up and saw Victor in all his glory, his sword out and burning white. Rasputin laughed. Then, every single person in the surrounding area came to a complete stop before turning to look at us, their eyes all black as night. I felt a chill ran up my spine. Royce and I both turned to look at them. "What's happening?" I asked. "It's a trap. He's infected the whole fucking city," Royce replied. "Why didn't our scanners pick up on it?" asked Janus. "What do we do?" asked Royce. I tightened my grip on my sword. "Survive," I said. Victor came down hard towards Rasputin, whose back exploded with a mass of black tentacles as the two engaged in combat. I didn't have much time to watch as we were sat upon by the civilians of Earth 1317, each one sprouting tendril-like masses on various parts of their bodies. The next few moments were a blur. I was lucky that I could move gracefully enough to avoid the creature's tendrils. My burning sword met with their flesh. I cut several down before Argyle ordered us to retreat. The whole city had become a battle between the keepers and the infected. We eventually found ourselves held up in a small stone structure and surrounded. Royce covered the doorway, while the creatures waited for us outside. "Computer, lock onto my position," Janus said into her earpiece. "Now, come get us." My heart was pounding at this point. I'd seen some weird shit in my time with the Ninth, but this was ridiculous. The moment was made all worse when Royce's voice called out. "Why aren't they attacking?" he asked. "Who cares? The ship's here," Janus said. That was when we were suddenly teleported back into the ship. I found myself looking through the windshield and out of breath. The flashes of plasma rifles coupled with the smoke made the hellscape look even more desolate. I turned to see Janus and Royce standing in silence. Then, I turned back to Cain, who was sitting there chanting with the stone in his lap. Then my eyes caught Argyle, who was standing at the small glass box that contained the alien penis of a Rasputin from another Earth. I turned back to the carnage below us. That was when I caught sight of Victor. Rasputin had further mutated. His form was now almost incomprehensible. I couldn't make out any human features aside from his legs, which held up a torso that was now just a mass of tentacles around a massive mouth where his abdomen used to be. Victor was powerful, unleashing a volley of slashes that managed to cut some of the tendrils off. But they were growing back faster than he could cut them off. The angel found himself being overwhelmed. He can fight this thing, right? Asked Royce.
Cain, we need you to hurry up,
I said as I turned to him, only to have my heart jump into my throat yet again.
Shit!
I called out. Argyle had taken the penis out of the container and it bonded with his already infected form. A black tendril was erupting from the wound on his shoulder and had made its way around Cain's throat. I moved into action with my sword, lopping the tentacle off, while Cain grabbed the part that was on his throat, causing it to combust. Janus and Royce both opened up on Argyle, but he mutated fast, faster than we could have comprehended. Tendrils were flying everywhere, and I couldn't cut them off fast enough. That was around the time something hit the ship from the outside. Everything after that is a blur. The ship went down. I know that. The next thing I knew, Janus was pulling me out of the wreckage. My head was bleeding. I still had my sword somehow. We were on the ground. What happened? I asked. The ship went down. My world was still spinning. Janus helped me to my feet. Where's Cain? I asked. I looked up to see Cain, kneeling with the stone in his arms, Royce's body below him. He's alive, but he's weak, Cain said. I looked around at the empty street ahead of us. At this point, even the sky was empty, aside from the charcoal gray haze. I also noticed something else. The sound of battle was gone. Why is everything so quiet? I asked. Argyle fucked our teleporter, Janus said. Where are we? I asked. The place where the war ended, Janus said. I looked around at the ruins around me. This place was once a massive city, one that would have reminded me of Rome. Now it was in ruins, just like the rest of this fucking planet. I got to my feet. Cain, can you send us back? I asked. Cain smiled at me. Of course, but first tell me, why fight to save a world with no one left in it? To save the rest of them, I said. Is the spell ready? Asked Janus. Cain sighed. It will be, he said as he lifted his hand to snap his fingers. He snapped. But we found ourselves in the exact same position. Cain's eyes grew wide as he turned to look at me. What? I asked. Then came the horn. The one I'd heard a million times. The one that used to bring joy and happiness. The one that meant help was on the way. The one that saved me countless times. My blood ran cold. Did you really think I was going to let you leave with the one item in the multiverse that could break the spell on my gate? That voice said from behind us. I turned to see Abaddon standing ahead of us, Quintus behind him. Then, the entire 9th Roman Legion all made revenants by that mad bastard. I gritted my teeth and readied my sword. Oh, Marcus, you don't have to die. Just give me the stone, Abaddon said. I'd rather not, I said. Janus stood beside me with her gun raised. Abaddon only smiled at us. It was easy, teleporting Rasputin here, luring the keepers, the stone, pulling your ship from the conflict. You did all this? I asked. Abaddon shrugged. I need the stone. Now give it to me. You can lick Neptune's creamy ballsack. Abaddon sighed. Quintus, he said. Quintus vanished from beside him and was suddenly in my face. Janus tried to turn with her gun, but he caught the barrel and yanked it out of her hands before kicking her to the ground. All of this happened before I could even get my sword up. When I did, I found Quintus's hand at my throat and my feet off the ground. His grip was icy and like stone. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't even think straight. I tried to struggle, but the horseman's strength was absolute. I watched as Abaddon calmly walked towards Cain, who stood his ground with the stone tucked under his hand. Cain, what happened, baby? You were Mom's favorite toy. She would have destroyed me when she had her fill, Cain growled. Abaddon laughed. You know, Mother, she's never got her fill. I still found myself struggling against Quintus. Quintus, don't, I gasped. My vision started to get blurry. That was when a bright flash of light just about blinded me. I found myself on the ground. Abaddon had been tossed into a building. Quintus was now storming toward Cain with his club ready. Cain, however, was levitating off of the ground, his eyes glowing white and the stone glowing bright red. Quintus made it a few steps from Cain when Cain's hand shot out. Quintus was pulled straight into Cain's grip. This isn't your true form. Remember who you are, horseman, Cain all but commanded. There was another flash of light. Then Quintus dropped to his hands and knees as Cain stood over him. I shot to my feet. What did you do to him? I asked. In order to maintain his horseman abilities, Abaddon didn't let his soul leave his body after he was killed, so I just restored his body. Jaina started to get to her feet behind me. She was gripping her ribs. I could see Quintus starting to stand up. Quintus? I asked. He turned to me, his eyes and mouth no longer stitched together. He actually looked semi-normal. Marcus? He asked. The amount of emotion that came over me in that moment is indescribable. It was like a child reuniting with a deceased parent. I wanted to hug him, but the moment was cut short. Kill them all! Abaddon commanded the revenants of the Legion as he freed himself from the rubble. I looked at Cain. Can you bring them back? I asked. No, Abaddon took their souls. He said sternly. We can still end this now, Jaina said. She's right, replied Cain. I can use the stone to kill him. I readied my sword as the Legion marched in on us. You remember what Father Time said? I asked. Who cares? He's right there, Jaina barked. What do you think, Quintus? I asked, remembering Father Time's words to me. Quintus looked at Abaddon, who was pulling his sword off of his back. Quintus turned to me. Your call. I was about to open my mouth when I heard the voice from Janus's comm device.
This is Keeper Grey. Victor is down. We're deploying a demon seed. All keepers evacuate.
I only chuckled at this. As I did so, the wreckage of Janus's ship moved slightly. We all turned as an oily black tendril burst out. Time seemed to slow as I tried desperately to gather my thoughts. I could stay and fight. I could try and avenge my brothers. There was a slight chance we could pull it off and die along the way. I glanced at Quintus. I'd at least gotten something back from this experience. Abaddon's forces, my former brothers, were closing in fast. I could see their dead eyes as they approached us. Then, it hit me. All this time I'd been feeling sorry for myself, not minding the idea of dying. But how could I honor what they gave their lives for if I sacrificed my own? If I died and I failed to kill them, their deaths would be for nothing. Take us home, I said as I turned to Cain, who snapped his fingers. The next thing I knew, we were standing back at the base of the cave, where Father Time stood waiting for us next to Merlin. He smiled widely when he saw us. I see things went terribly, but given the circumstances, it was best case scenario. Did the demon seed kill him? I asked. Father Time raised an eyebrow. No, he teleported away with his royal guardsmen. I could hear Janus groan behind me. Don't worry yourselves. You will get your chance at him, at some point. But before you do, there is something you should know. That was when Victor appeared next to him, seemingly out of nowhere. His white wings were speckled with blood, his face covered in cuts. He seemed surprised, yet pleased to see Quintus. I told you before that Kahanian business wasn't necessarily the Keeper's problem. Well, it is now. I could see Janus straighten up in the corner of my eye. I've been doing some digging, examining the Earths in which this anomaly appeared, with Rasputin's, nasty bits. As it turns out, in each of these timelines, he's been given a book by all of our favorite Demon King. A book with the power to summon parasitic organisms from the outside. But he's rigged said book with a spell that causes it to teleport from universe to universe after it's been used. Oh no, I heard Quintus mutter. Book? What book? I asked. It's an ancient book called the Necronomicon, one that was written by Lilith herself whilst possessed by Amonu. It's one of the most dangerous items in the multiverse, and it must be destroyed. I'd thought Lucifer had it locked in Gehenna's vault, but I guess with the regime change. Quintus stated. It's a multiversal threat? Asked Janus. Yes, and so much more. Father Time said, as he knelt down over the still unconscious Royce. He touched Royce on the forehead, and the man gasped for air. So what now? I asked. Father Time looked past me, and at Janus. I'm putting you in charge of a special division. One that's primary focus will be Kahanian threats. Marcus, you're invited to stay if you wish. Your task will be to find this book, before it can unleash all hell on the multiverse. I could see Janus kind of smile. This decision pleased her. I looked over at Quintus, who nodded at me. I turned back to Father Time. What do we call this new unit of yours? I asked. Father Time smirked. Hell Hunters.